Again, good afternoon. This is Gary Trevor, Legacy Men's Podcast, and my co-associate, Jason Gonzalez. We are thrilled tonight to have Chad Robichaux, a legend. He is the original with a lion's heart. So Chad Robichaux's got a story as long as my arm and longer. His family goes back to his grandfather, his dad. So 80 years basically in the military, covering World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and of course 14 years active service for Chad, I believe, and then 4 years with JSOC, which he had to apply for. He served as a air marshal, correct?
I did.
And I think you also you worked for the State Department in some capacity?
I did. I did just a little stint with the State Department, kind of helped them revamp their surveillance detection program.
Okay.
So that was my stint of living in D.C., which I love D.C., but I don't think I'd ever want to live there again.
No.
And you were doing some undercover detective work
Yeah.
in
So
Mexico, right?
no. I did. But my 14 years was active and reserve time, and during my reserve years, I was a police officer. I was going to college to come back in the Marine Corps as an officer,
Right.
which I chose not to later on. But during that time, I was a police officer in New Orleans. And worked for St. Charles Sheriff's Department there, and worked patrol. I worked in the detective bureau, but also worked. But originally, right out of police academy, I worked undercover.
Okay.
Narcotics, yeah.
And also, so just to go on with Chad, because his story is just so huge. So married 28 years to Kathy, who's a totally awesome lady.
Yep, 29 actually.
29, excuse me,
Not to
congratulations.
correct you, but,
Yes,
but
I'll take it.
That's the most important one for her, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So 29 years to Kathy, who's gone through all the stuff that he's gone through. He has two beautiful daughters, two sons, Hunter and Hayden, both who have served now in the military. And I'm excited also to say that he was kind enough to write two beautiful books, Saving Aziz, and then, of course, Mission Without Borders. And I have to tell you guys, both books he wrote, he narrates. And the one that really got me, of course, was Saving Aziz, because in amongst all that and getting hold of him, he then went back, I think, in 21.
21.
And you went and saved and got additional 17,000 Afghanis who had supported us throughout the 20-year war.
Yeah.
Plus also, he has gone to the front lines with help from all sources, to the front lines of Ukraine. And amongst all that noise out there, helping the guys with no guns, but just supporting them. So I wanted to, and then of course you've got the support mechanism as well. What's the group, the company you have?
Mighty Oaks.
Mighty Oaks.
Mighty Oaks Foundation, yeah.
Which is huge.
Yeah, Mighty Oaks is, we've served over we started in 2011. We've served over 500,000 active duty service members, veterans, first responders. So it's
Right.
incredible. We have such an incredible team there with guys that are, a lot of them are alumni from Mighty Oaks. They came through and they're paying it forward and just doing incredible work.
So I think Jason and I were talking about tonight, we would love to hear your testimony. I think when I was watching one of your things that you sent the video, when you got up and the pastor said, who's a good friend of yours, and he said, just share your testimony. Of course, we've got questions along the way as well, but I think your testimony is so powerful, how, who, what you are, your wife, your kids, which we both experienced, the PTSD piece, which was pretty intense,
Right.
and how your wife stood with you, and your wife stood with you, and my wife stood with myself. And of course, then your son was just unbelievable. I want to be like Dad. I want to be like Dad. And you're like, eesh, do you really want to be in the military? Do you really want to go to Ukraine?
Yeah.
And I love the example in Mission Without Borders when he had to do all the Wi-Fi stuff. And you said, son, trust me, stay where you are and you'll get a chance.
Yeah.
So,
And I got to say, for listeners, this is something to definitely tune into. Turn it up. That was right. 17,000 people that they went to go get out of Afghanistan. And I think the coolest part is that we're talking about fear here, which is one of those things that every man experiences, whether we like to admit it or not. We're scared of something. We fall into moments where we're out of control, right? We just don't have control over a situation or over our actions. And we're going to talk through that. So you mentioned something about how many times fear not is mentioned in the Bible.
365 times. I think it's no coincidence that God gave us that for one for every day of the year.
Yeah, I love that fact. I never thought about that.
Yeah, me neither.
I mean, it's there in the Bible, guys. I mean, it's there for a reason, right? That's the ultimate playbook that we're going off of, and it's something we're going to talk about today. So buckle in.
Yeah.
So talk to us about you've taught on this as well. Why you choose that? Like, what do you feel like men are thinking when you pick that as a topic?
Well, yeah, I often use it as a topic. And one of the places I've used it in the last few years most has been Marine Corps boot camp, because if you're going to do the job of a Marine, of a warrior, if you could, or even beyond that, if you're going to be just a man in this world that's living a biblical mandate to stand up for what's right, to lead a family, to stand against the shift in culture, like you're going to have to do difficult things, and those things are going to be scary, whether it's physically scary, right? Maybe you're scared of failing. Maybe you're scared of not being good enough. Maybe you're scared of getting hurt. Maybe you're scared of for your family to get hurt. So there's tons of, I could go on and on, all the examples of things we fear.
Yeah.
So for men to say that machoism or bravado means that we shouldn't be scared is just, it's wrong. And when and so when you deny the fact that if you want to deny the fact that you're ever going to get scared, then you're not equipped to face it. So I think it's really important for men to talk about, and tough men to talk about fear.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with fear? And the greatest example there is Jesus at Calvary.
Amen.
I mean, you've got Jesus at Calvary, who is man, but he also is God. And he's in the Garden of Gethsemane. The Bible said he paced back and forth for over an hour, throwing himself on the ground, his face first on the ground, asking God if there's a different way.
Yeah.
And he knew what he had to do and why he had to do it. And in the book of Luke, it says his sweat was like drops of blood.
Amen.
And so the Bible in multiple books describes a man in anguish, praying for over an hour, pacing in distress, looking for a way around this thing that he was fearful of, but yet, what do we see him do? He when they came to get him, he told his friends, he's like, here comes my betrayers. Like, let's go do this. Like, he was scared.
Yeah.
He knew it was gonna be terrible, but he did it anyway.
Yeah.
And
I heard a message about he chose the nails that depicts exactly what that choice looks like. When it's like you could have taken every single horse and carriage and you would not have been able to pull him to the cross. I mean, he made a conscious decision to go to the cross.
Yeah, he chose to do it.
Manliest thing he could do, and it was all based off of love.
Yeah, and I mean, there's tons of quotes out there. I can't remember the name of the person that said this, but it said, courage is not the absence of fear; it's the choice that something's more important than that fear. So it's not that we're.
That's good.
Courage isn't being like saying, "Hey, I'm not scared." Courage is saying, "Yeah, I'm scared, but something's more important than that fear." And I know we through this won't get time to go through all of it, but there was a moment where, at the end of the Afghanistan evacuations, and by the way, 17,000. I'm glad you pointed that out. It sounds like a ridiculous number, and I actually love this. Right now, there's some scrutiny. The people hadn't been loud enough yet, but there's a group of people that kind of go after veterans, and they're like, that's baloney. They didn't raise 17,000 people. That's impossible. And I'm like, I'm so glad you're saying that, because that's what I've been saying all along. Like, it is impossible.
Yes.
Like, I'm not smart enough, capable enough, logistically suave enough or networked enough to pull off what we did to rescue 17,000 people.
17,000.
So to say it was impossible, I say yes. Like, praise God,
Yep.
He did the impossible. So
Because
so that's
God
kind of what I say to that. But at the end of that operation, the last thing we did was we went to the Panjshir River in Tajikistan, and we swam across the Panjshir River every night into Afghanistan to build these routes out for these women and children. And when my wife was bringing me to the airport to do that, because I came home because my oldest daughter got married. I came home, did a wedding, and we're going back. And it was myself and Dennis Price were flying there to do that. And my wife was like, started this argument with me on the way to the airport. And I'm sure no one listening here gets arguments with their spouse on the way to the airport.
Oh, no, never.
But she starts this argument, and she's mad, but she's probably more scared, right? She's scared, and she's like, why are you doing this? Like, you already got Aziz. He already got his family. You've got 17,000 people. We didn't know the exact number at the time, but we knew how
Pretty well close.
And now you're going back, like, and you're going to swim across the river. And I'm like, I'm not going to swim across that river. She's like, I know you're going to swim across that river, and going back in Afghanistan. And the only way I knew how to say in that moment was, what if it was us? Like, what if our daughter and our sons were on the other side of the river? What if it was our sons that would be forced into madrasas to become Taliban? Our daughter that'd be sexually enslaved and raped every day for the rest of her life? What if it was us? And I think sometimes, in America, which I love living here, but there's not naiveness that comes with that, to think that could never happen to
Right.
us, right?
Yeah.
Where you grew up,
Yeah.
in South Africa, right? You think that could never happen, but like it can, first of all,
Yes, it
and
can.
it is to these people. And if God opened doors to allow me to be able to help, how could I say no when I know that on the other side of the river, some 9-year-old girl praying that someone's gonna come help, her parents are praying that someone's gonna come help and prevent her from being a sexual slave the rest of her life. Like, and if I have the ability to go do that, I have to go. If God starts closing doors, then I'm not gonna push through. But if the doors are open, I have to go. And I'm like, what if it was us? And I got her consent in that moment. And the truth is, I was scared to go do that. But on the other side of the river was something more important than that fear. It was a 9-year-old girl who I'd never met before,
But
thousands of them that needed help.
but also the same token, she knew also the Taliban was after you as well. Your name was out there, and they were looking for you big time as well. So that was one of the other things. Not about crossing the river, but also the Taliban's like, we got to get this guy.
Yeah.
So you were out there as a wanted person, basically more than anybody else at the time too, because of who you are and what you had done. So that was huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really tried to keep it off the radar, but you can't pretend to, like. I talked a little bit about it in the book, but you can't like. I'm not Chad with a different last name at JSOC anymore. Like Chad Robichaux has a big Instagram account and runs a big organization, so I can't fly into another country where they have Pisces facial recognition software and pretend to be somebody I'm not. I don't have access to get a fake passport, or I don't have access. So
You're not Tom Cruise.
yeah. So I'm a civilian, and so the best thing to do, I do humanitarian work, but I'm a civilian, and I'm limited to those resources. So the best thing to do is just lean into who it was, and so we just said, I used Mighty Oaks. Hey, I'm bringing this veteran, Dennis, who was coming with me.
Yeah.
We both Afghanistan veterans. We're horrified for what just happened, and we're avid outdoorsmen, and we want to go get a G-BOW permit to go into the mountains of Tajikistan and look across that border one more time at Afghanistan. And by the grace of God and the miracle and providence of God, we got that permit and was able to go there and do that.
Sorry, go ahead, Jay.
I want to talk about, so for viewers and listeners here, just to kind of get the context of, if you haven't served or anything, you haven't been to another country like this, just to paint the picture, because I heard you talking about it on another podcast, where obviously we're focused on the news and what they're reporting, what's not getting done, the hypocrisy, everything that happens at that point in time, because everybody's focused on politics, right? The way that you guys raised money and how you got out there is, I don't want to discredit any of that, right? So the people, the players that came in, because this is the best country on the planet, and you said it best, it's like, we have the best people that outside of all of the political views and everything that was going on, Americans stood up to be American and go and do this. But the why, when you're talking to your wife about this, the things that you had seen and the picture that you painted about mothers hurling their children to try to get them over a fence to get on a plane in just complete despair. Can you walk us through that? Because it's just you're right. It's not something we'll ever see in this. We'd hope in this country.
Yeah.
But can you paint that picture? Because it's like that's why.
Essentially, we're being told we're in this endless war, this 20-year war that America's sons and daughters and were needed to be brought home. That there was 2,500 troops there, which at one point there was 1,500 troops there. That was a lot of American people. By the way, there's 2,500 U.S. troops at that time in about 12 different places in the world. And so Afghanistan, why Afghanistan, right? The truth is we have 80,000 troops in Japan since World War II, 40,000 in Germany since World War II, 35,000 in South Korea since the Korea War, protecting the 30th parallel. Keeping troops and contingents around the world don't keep us from war, it prevents wars.
Correct.
Bagram Air Force Base is the most strategic place in the globe between Iraq, Iran, Russia, and China. And it kept stability and peace. The entire international community were participating to support and advise the Afghan National Army and Afghan National Police to keep the Taliban at bay in the mountains, and it was working. The entire international community. So the White House didn't talk to the international community. The White House didn't talk to the Afghan government. We spent 20 years putting in place the White House only spoke with the Taliban, our enemy of 20 years. It makes no sense whatsoever. Yeah. And the only person that had benefited from that withdrawal was Pakistan, China, and Iran. And so not only did we make the mistake to do that, but we did it in such a rapid way that we removed we closed the Bagram Air Force Base, we closed our military base, we removed our military troops, we closed our embassy before we evacuated our U.S. citizens and before we evacuated our allies. And it created a vacuum for the Taliban to come in. And then they were coordinating with the Taliban. And then as the military started trying to do what the military does to protect American citizens through what's called the NEO operation, non-combatant evacuation operation, the White House thought that the military would have a biased heart towards their relationship with the Afghan people. So they took that role from the United States military and gave it to the State Department. So now the stronghold, which is the Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul, Afghanistan, was treated like an embassy. And so the State Department's in charge and using the military as embassy guards. And so they could not go out and rescue Americans that were trapped there or our allies. They gave the outer perimeter to the Taliban. Now, anybody that understands any kind of military battlefield concept, whoever has the outer perimeter controls that ground space.
Correct.
Right.
And so now the White House, in those decisions, gets on the media and says, I don't understand the problem. Like, if you want to leave, all you have to do is go to the airport. Well, some 20-year-old girl who went there to teach English or work for a missionary or work in a medical center is going to take her blue passport and show it to a Taliban fighter who's executing people in the street. What a grotesque thing for the White House to say while people are fighting for their lives to get through that gate. The gate had got so bad. Over 100,000 people were there trying to get in that gate, sheer panic. And one of the things that people saw was the people falling off the airplane, that level of desperation of people falling and jumping off that airplane when it took off. But you mentioned one of the things that I thought was the biggest statement of how the level of desperation of Afghan people there. To be so desperate that you have an infant baby and that you know that if your baby stays there, that if it's a boy, it's going to be forced into madrasas and become a Taliban fighter and just taught evil. If it's a girl, if your baby's a girl, she'll be, at 9 years old, she'll be sexually enslaved and raped every day the rest of her life and live a life of slavery. So you love this baby so much, you're willing to kiss it goodbye, never to see it again, put it on top of a crowd of 100,000 people to be surfed like a beach ball to the gate. And then what they were doing is everyone at the end of the gate knew to try to hand it to the troops. And the troops, U.S. troops, were told not to take them. So they would grab it by arm and leg and throw it as hard and as high as they could to get it over that wall. What they didn't know was on the other side of that wall, in some places, were about 6 feet high and 20 feet deep of concertina wire, razor wire. My buddy Joe counted 6 babies that had hung up in there and bled out in that razor wire. Like, that's the level of desperation that was at HKIA. And so for our team, just so honored, everybody was working in that environment. Our ground team to go do rescues there, our team in Abu Dhabi, the team back in Washington, D.C. process. If anybody stopped for 5 minutes of sleep, you were trading it for someone's life. So it was just nonstop. My buddy Seaspray lost 37 pounds in 10 days. And during that 10 days, it was just getting as many, and like I said, God orchestrated our ability to be there, first of all, because we're not under no circumstances should we have had permission to be able to be there. They wouldn't let the military do it. But we got, through God's favor, permission from the Joint Chiefs to go there and do that. What they wouldn't allow the military to do. And then now we had to move people without visas across the border once they got onto that base. Now, how do you do that, right? That's human trafficking. The only place you can do that is in Laredo, Texas. Well, except until January 20th, you can't.
Correct.
No more. But in the real world, you have to follow the laws. You can't just take people across borders. There's trafficking people if you move anybody across the border, especially children. Right. So we got permission from the United Arab Emirates, which was another miracle to be able to do that. Not only did they say they would take them to the humanitarian center, but they would provide medical care and treatment and set up a facility for the State Department to have to come in and vet them, other countries to come in, because we weren't taking them. A lot of people think, why'd you bring 17,000 people to the United States? We didn't. We got 17,000 people out of Afghanistan.
Correct.
Whatever State Department or other country decided to do it. That's I don't have the authority to bring. People are like, what do you guys even know who these people are? I'm like, you think I have the authority to bring somebody to America? I don't have that authority. I'm just getting them across the border, getting them to safety. And now it forced the hand of our State Department, which is why they probably hate me more than the Taliban. Secretary Blinken personally knows my name, I promise you, and does not like me. So I put a lot of pressure on him, and the White House is embarrassing for us to do this. And so in addition to that, the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, when I say UAE, the United Arab Emirates country, said not only will we house them and take care of them, but we'll give you a C-17 plane, a large military plane. And pilots, if you fill that up, will do a second one.
Yeah.
And then we realized, God had just really given us a real opportunity here.
Yeah.
And if we want to, we have the ability to help a lot of people, but it's going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
And not thousands of dollars, millions of dollars.
Right.
And how do we do that? Well,
Well, you started with Aziz.
Started with Aziz. This was all about, for me, to kind of take the credit off of me.
Yeah.
This was a super selfish intended thing for me. It was me going to get my friend.
Yeah.
And I put all these guys together that I could get to come help me get my friend.
Yeah.
But
because that was 65,000, if I'm not mistaken.
What's that?
That you were
I
like, hey,
raised
we need
about $65,000.
Yeah.
We were getting Aziz. That
Yeah.
was the first plan.
Yeah.
But God just burned our hearts and showed us an opportunity, and we just leaned in, and He'll figure it out. And I always say, if it's God's will, it's God's bill.
Yeah.
And He had planned it. He had orchestrated it out. And I've been giving this talk at corporate events on networking and integrity. And so all that. So I'll say this first before I tell you that piece. We ended up getting a call from Glenn Beck, and he had went on the radio, just like this microphone here. That's all he knew how to do, and he thought he'd raise a couple of $1,000s. Well, and day 3 had raised $26 million, ultimately $45 million.
Yeah.
And he's like, he's like, hey Chad, I called you because I heard something was I wanted to do something. I don't know what to do with this money. And I'm like, I know exactly what we're gonna do. We're gonna start chartering planes. And that's God just bringing all this together. But the reason I talk about this corporate events, and I think it's beyond corporate events, church, network, life, networking, relationships, having integrity is so foundational to anything you do, because I could say that all that happened in 3 days, the logistics and the miracle that God orchestrated happened in 3 days, but it didn't happen in 3 days. It happened in 30 years of my life, add all the other people involved, life of building relationships, proving you're trustable, being someone that would be Glenn Beck's first call.
Right.
Like being someone's first call because you've proven over years that you're dependable.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't happen in 3 days. That happens over a lifetime, longevity of treating people well, doing the right thing, consistently showing up and being available and making sure that interactions you have between whether it's business or relationships, that they're win-win, that you're not always getting over on people. Those things like pay dividends when you need them. And so it seems like this miracle of like this all happened in 3 days, but it wasn't 3 days. And God had been seaming that together for years. And
So go ahead. What you were saying about it's not, and I think we miss that when we read the books and when we hear the stories that this just happened in 30 days. All you focus on that, but it's the 30 years, and ironically, it turns into what Todd McIntyre, who was here previously, talking about the discipline, the practice, the discipline, the practice. Kind of give us an overview, so to speak, in a cliff version of your life and what led you to this visceral thing here in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I'd say like the networking opportunity for sure. And then
you would understand that.
Just having kind of the differences in the what was going on while you were doing this, because I've heard time and time again, you were the hardest working, fastest promoted. I mean, everything you did it to the best of your ability. And then outside of that, at home, in your faith, that hadn't worked into that just yet. So I'd like to get into some of that as well, just so that...
I'll just give it like a kind of wave top my personal testimony, because it's the foundation of all this. Like you said when you introduced me, I grew up in a historically military family, although military service in our family was not career service. So
it wasn't?
Yeah, so most people in my family served like their enlistment and then they're done. So it wasn't. We didn't grow up on military bases and stuff like that. So I grew up in very southern Louisiana. Very, I'd say, blue collar, but like bayou, like mud between your toes, poor. I didn't even know it was poor. I never even knew I was poor growing up. I was really poor growing up. I didn't know it because everybody else was that way. Yeah. But a lot of hardship, a lot of dysfunction. My brother was killed when I was 14 years old. He was 15. What I had left of a family fell apart. Our dream was to go in the Marine Corps and follow my dad's footsteps, even though he was kind of dysfunctional human being. We just still wanted to follow his footsteps, and we also had wanted to be in special operations. So
I want to slow down there because your brother at that age, you were how old?
I was 14 and he was 15.
He was 15, and that was by a friend.
Well, we had broken families, so he had
Yeah.
a stepbrother on the other
Okay.
side of the family that was 11 years old and shot him in the chest. They were in an argument and shot him with a shotgun in the chest, and so he died instantly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so
And that was, I mean, that's tough for somebody.
super tough. I mean,
I mean,
as the closest person
yeah.
when you grow up in a dysfunctional home like that, you
Yeah.
get really closer to siblings, and he and I. Kind of, especially physical abuse and all the things we went through. We were very, very close, and we were 13 years old. We had made a decision and we were going to join the Marine Corps, kind of escape the lifestyle. We were watching all these videos and knew about the Navy SEAL program, but we were like, we wanted to be Marines, and so I started reading these books about Force Recon Marines and Recon Marines in Vietnam, and that was so we started running and swimming, and that's what we were going to do. And I think that's a big part of my motivation to stay that path.
Yeah.
But when my brother died, my mom couldn't handle the loss of a son. My dad couldn't handle a grieving wife, so she went and lived with her parents. My dad went to work overseas. I went and lived with my 20 or 21-year-old sister, and was working and trying to go to high school at the same time, and just wasn't going to happen. I went to a Marine Corps recruiter when I was 17 years old, and told him the situation I was in, and he helped me get in the Marine Corps without a high school diploma even. And so 17 years old, I'm in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
A year in, I become a Recon Marine.
Yeah.
And
if you don't mind, I'm going to kind of go back to your childhood a little bit, because a lot of men, everything happens behind closed doors, right? And a lot of men don't share a lot of these things, but I'm sure a lot of men experienced dysfunctional families growing up. So when you say that, your father being abusive, can you kind of walk us through just what that was? What, like, if you ever just thought back on it, and you're just like, man, this really like hurt with me trying to build my faith, but at the same time, this is what he was going through. This was my toughest moment, and this is why, like, as an adult, I started to experience some things that were battling back and forth between it.
Yeah, well, my dad joined the Marine Corps, so a lot of people don't realize that in Vietnam, if you were drafted, you didn't get drafted to go to the Marine Corps. You're drafted to go in the Army or the Army or the Navy.
Okay.
That's what you get drafted to do. So you didn't get drafted to the Marine Corps. If you went in the Marine Corps, it's because you chose to go to the Marine Corps. My father, in the midst of Vietnam, chose to join the Marine Corps with an infantry contract, which is basically like standing in front of a firing squad.
Right.
So why would he do that? Well, he was driving to high school his senior year with his best friend in the passenger seat, and he was goofing off, and he drove in the back of a garbage truck, and his best friend died. And so his response was to go to Marine Corps recruiter, and join the Marine Corps infantry to go to Vietnam and die. That was his response to that and grief. And so he didn't die, but he came home, and he was probably pretty dead inside.
Yeah.
And so a lot of alcohol, drugs. He was a very violent man, which my grandfather, my dad's brothers are all the same way. So just super aggressive, and so he's extremely physically abusive, like on my mom and then my stepmom, putting his hands on them. I mean, like punching, choking, like he was very, very aggressive, and so for me, as young as age as I can remember, I mean, I think I was talking about Sean Ryan. Remember him like as an infant being held under the water, and just like and then I remember just never like spankings. I'm not talking about spankings. Like being punched in the face as a kid, and then as soon as I was like probably like 12, 13 years old, then he wanted to like really fight, like try to fight me, and so
this was him
that type of physical,
almost like drowning you. Like around what age was that?
I had this. It's weird, really weird, because I always had this memory. And the first time I mentioned it was when I was on Sean Ryan's show. But I had this memory of being and I seen it like almost. I see me as a baby being held under the water, trying to breathe in the bathtub, and suffocating and trying to breathe and crying, and then put back under the water. Right. I don't mean like under the tub. I mean the running bath water, and so I'd held that for a long time, and I was with my mom, and I told my mom that. I didn't ask her. I told her that I had this like vision of that, because this is like thinking like maybe like a year, 18 months old,
right?
Like baby. That's kind of what I'm envisioning, like maybe a year old baby. And when I told my mom that, she broke down sobbing, crying, and she told me that my dad would do that when I was crying. He couldn't handle me crying as a baby, and so he'd say, "You want something to cry about," and then hold me into the water like that to try to stop me from crying, or to make it worse. And so it's really strange, that you would remember something like that. Obviously, it's a traumatic event.
Yeah.
But my mind visually sees it in like a third person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so can't explain that, but
Yeah.
but
And so, like-
so my mom validated that was
Yeah.
not only a thought but
Yeah.
an experience.
Reality.
Yeah, it was an experience.
I think the important thing here is with what Jason's saying, I think it's important also to get to the place where in your life did you come to a knowledge of God, where God was a reality to you. So because you held so much stuff, like Jason says, and I think not to that degree, but I think verbal's just as bad as being held underwater or whatever the case is. So at what point, Chad, did God or the Holy Spirit come and kind of nudge you a little bit and bring you back into a more hopeful lifestyle?
Well, at two occasions, 20 years apart. So there's a lot
wow.
between those 20 years. When my brother died, this family that I was very close to, but lived about an hour away, brought me to church. And I was there, and the pastor, gave an altar call, and the whole message he was talking to me, right? One of those experiences where he was talking directly to me. And I rushed up to that altar and had this encounter where, I just gave all that I had, all the pain, and I was just like in such a dark place, having my brother had just been killed, and just surrendered my life to Christ. And even obviously a kid, 14 years old, going through that. But that was they lived an hour away. I went back home, no follow up, no discipleship.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm such a believer of discipleship now, because I had this moment at 14 years old. A lot of pain would have been saved if I'd had follow up discipleship. But now fast forward to what I was saying earlier. Go to the Marine Corps at 17 years old, become a recon Marine, go through all the training, military free fall school, dive school, do all this training for 10 years of training, go in reserves, go to become a police officer, get in a shooting as a police officer. 9/11 happens. I go back on active duty, and then I thought I was going to deploy right away, didn't deploy, helped stand up the Air Marshal program, and then finally get a chance to deploy, I end up eventually going in a JSOC task force, get to serve in a role with what I believe to be the premier special operations unit in the world. So it was a huge privilege. Least qualified person, by the way, to get the chance to go there. Just circumstances allowed me to get to go there.
Yeah.
And as a Force Recon Marine, I'm training on be a team member. Now I'm at this premier unit in a role called AFO, Advanced Force Operator, doing all the clandestine logistics. A very unique and special job, but I think a lot of people think special operations and all the guys that you're the assaulter going in. This is actually go ahead of the assaulters, build all the clandestine infrastructure so those assaulters get on target to capture, kill bad guys.
So where did you come into? So you said 20-year gaps. And at what point in this in this part of your life did you come into a second experience where there was a sustained follow-up, and then Christ really kind of grew in you and helped you through this stuff and gave you that, what I call, a heart of a lion to keep pursuing what you did?
Oh yeah. So to answer that, I'll bring everything in real summarization. That task force, 8 deployments to Afghanistan, 15 friends later, some horrible things, including being abducted by a foreign intelligence agency, which I won't say which one. He was redacted. You read in the book.
Sure,
And then coming home, being diagnosed with PTSD, debilitating panic attacks, anxiety, ultimately leading to me separating from my family, in a 3-year downward spiral, a suicide attempt in 2010, and then my wife finding me in my apartment, attempting to take my life during that suicide attempt. Really giving me this challenge, asking me this really tough question that convicted me. You can do all this stuff you did in your career, right? But when it comes to your family, you'll quit. And that challenged me, and she was right. I'd quit on all the things.
That's a very powerful statement. Just say it again for the audience. I think that's just so very powerful.
Yeah, I mean, she just asked me. She's like, how could you do all this stuff that I seen you do? Like, because we were 17 and 18 when we met, so she saw me become a recon Marine, and the training and schools and deployments and MMA fights and cutting weight and all the discipline it took, right? She's seen all that, and she's like, how can you do all of that when it comes to your family? You'll quit. And like she's right. I've been successful in professional things, but when it came to the most important things, like being a husband, being a father, being a young 17-year-old kid that raised his hand and made a commitment to do something important, I quit all those things, including my will to live. And in that moment, I made a pretty radical decision to get back in the fight. But truthfully, it had nothing to do with God. It was just, I'm going to take that work ethic, that discipline she was talking about, and I'm going to pull this back together. But I knew I couldn't do it alone. And I knew I couldn't do it with the people I surrounded myself by, because I surrounded myself by people that told me everything I wanted to hear and not what I needed to hear. So I didn't really have any accountability. And so while we were separated, because at this moment we were separated for like 3 months, and she had been going to this church. And so I asked her if she could reach out to some man at this church. It had nothing to do with pursuing God. It was just because the circle I had was people that just lifted me up. I wanted someone outside of my circle. So I met this man named Steve Toth. He was an elder on call at the church. Never in the military, not an MMA fighter, nothing like that. He ran a small pool company in town. And when I met him, I had a plan, I had a paper, like a plan of how I was going to fix my life, and I slid it over to him. And really what I wanted him to do was tell Kathy that I was serious, and she would just sweep everything under the rug. But he looked at this plan and said that this plan didn't have anything to do with your relationship with God. I'm not going to waste your time. I'm not going to let you waste mine. And that was exactly what I needed to hear, because I had tried everything. I'd been on medication, counseling, all these programs. I had financial success again. In 3 years, I had rebuilt myself financially. I had rebuilt my ego. I was won an MMA world title, like all these things on the surface, but underneath that false facade of success, I was broken. And like I said, I tried medication, VA programs, all these programs. Some of those things were good, some of those things were bad, but none of those things changed my situation. So in that moment, I made a decision to try something different. We have a saying at Mighty Oaks: if what you're doing isn't working, why not try something different?
Amen.
And so I did, and I gave Jesus a chance to surrender my life to Christ. But beyond the decision, Steve mentored me an entire year in biblical living. And the difference this time with the follow-up was actually giving me some biblical life principles to live by in response to the decision to be the man God called me to be. And it sounds super simplistic when I say it out loud, but it was very intentional for me, is that all these bad things that happened to me, as bad as, like I mentioned some of them here, in my childhood, in my life in Afghanistan, as bad as those things were, those things did not leave me to be in that closet with my pistol in my hand trying to take my life.
Right.
What led me there were choices that I made. And so now through discipleship, I'm getting introduced to a set of choices to make differently. Of course, I still had anxiety. I still got depression. I still had tough times where I got angry. But now I had a blueprint to make better choices in response to those things. And so I would be very intentional about, okay, I'm feeling this way. Instead of making the same choice I always made, I'm going to pause. I'm either going to seek out what the right decision is biblically, or I'm going to reach out to the person discipling me, and I'm going to make a different choice. And that's, as simplistic as it sounds, that intentionality behind that led me to restoration, to hope, and ultimately finding a new purpose. And that purpose manifested in me starting Mighty Oaks Foundation and paying it forward and being involved in the stuff I'm involved in now.
Is that how Aziz came to Christ as well?
So I would say Aziz, like many Afghans that was serving on our side, would probably say they're Muslim because culturally they're supposed to say that.
Right.
But they're probably agnostic at best. I wouldn't say atheist. They're probably agnostic at best. Any Muslim that I've spent time around that really has read the Quran knows that there's holes in it. They know there's something off and something wrong. And so you'll see a curiosity about Jesus because they know who Jesus is. Jesus is one of the people they pray to. Most Muslims pray to Jesus more than most Christians pray to Jesus. They're praying to him every day. They're praying to him in a wrong identity, right? They believe he was a prophet, and they believe he was the greatest prophet, right? But they know who Jesus is. They know about certain things, but they know there's holes in the Quran, and so they're seeking it. So Aziz was like that agnostic Muslim, right, and watched me from afar have this conversion, and he reached a point saying, "Hey, whatever Chad believes, I believe," and because he's like, "Whatever's working for you, it's not working. It's not working for me."
Yeah.
And then, but then he had his own personal encounter when we were coming to rescue him, where he got on his knees and he knew the Taliban was coming.
Yeah.
And he's handing his wife a gun. He's handing his daughter hand grenades. Hey, when they've come from this corner, you do this. This corner, you do this. Like, that we're going to make a final stand here. That's where he was at. And Muhammad wasn't answering his prayers because Muhammad's dead. And Jesus is alive, and he knows that. And he said he knew that. He knew, and so he got on his knees and said, Jesus, I know Muhammad's dead, and you're alive, and if you could petition me to your Father to save me and my family, then I'll serve you the rest of my life, and I'll tell everybody about you. And he went to sleep and had this incredible dream about Jesus coming, about Jesus had this encounter with Jesus in his dream, and about us rescuing him. And he woke up from this dream. The phone rang, and I called him, and I didn't know he had this dream, but the phone rang. It was me, and I called and said, "Hey, brother, hang on, we're coming to get you." And I don't know why I said this, because I was in a hurry, because I just wanted him to know, hey, hang on, we're coming. And then I said, the last thing I said before I got off the phone was, "Hey, God loves you," because I didn't know if I was to talk to him again.
Wow.
And because I was coming to get him, but I didn't know if he was going to live. I said,
Yeah.
"God loves you," and I hung up the phone, and he had just had that dream. And so he's kept his word to God.
Amen.
He's come to America.
Cool.
He's been baptized, and he professes Jesus.
Okay.
He goes to my church every week, and he's led a large number of people to Christ through Mighty Oaks.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we've got Saving Aziz. What's
Mission Without Borders.
And that's not in the
Without
book, by the way,
Borders.
because when I wrote that book, none of that.
Was that? Okay.
He had not made it back yet.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just
So we're gonna
amazing.
get his book.
And there's,
You have to.
I mean, we're out of time here, but I wanted to recap some other gems that I was just thinking about as I was, just kind of figuring out the history of what this looks like from how God put some of these things together, the seeds that He sowed. And one of the things you had said about Aziz is that the way that he took care of you and all of the different places that you had to go, the flags that would be on the rearview mirror, the clothes that you had to wear, how you needed to wear it.
Yep.
I mean, you were one step away from dying if he hadn't have given you that information, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what it's like when you have a true spiritual warrior at your side.
Well said.
Yeah.
One of those individuals that is constantly going to tell you, and it goes both ways, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think he even handed you a rifle at some point in time because there was another rifle that wasn't working as well. And he's like, "You're a better shot than I am.
Yeah.
You take this." And you were like, "I know, so I will," right?
Yeah.
And then there was...
Yeah, Afghans can't shoot very well. Thank God.
Well, you guys got in, some crazy battles together, just moments where you were supposed to die. You talked about also the individuals that came to just pick you up, and that was when you actually knew that you were going to die. There was many other moments where you feared, but your courage stepped up and stepped in. But this was a moment where you felt like, "Yep, this is it. They're going to take my life."
Yeah, for sure.
And it's outstanding to say that when you did come back, your wife, when she had showed up, it was right after you had won your world title.
Yeah.
And you were standing there on stage. Your arm got lifted up. It was a decision, right? Mm-hmm. That it went to a decision. Your arm was raised, but you didn't feel like you had won.
Yeah. Actually, the fight before that was my my title.
Okay.
And Legacy FC, and then Strike Force. So that win put me at rank number 6 in the world. So it was a pretty big win because it was positioning me for the UFC opening up the new 125-pound weight class.
Right.
So it was really a strategic move and win, and it was a real big deal. And should have been elated.
Yeah.
To win, but I'm separated from my family. I'm cheating on my wife. I'm just total degenerate, right? So in that moment, I'm in the middle of that ring, and my hands held high, and 10,000 people were cheering, and I was just like, man, like all these people here, these 10,000 people here in this arena, it's on Showtime, like all these people watching. Now one of them's Kathy, right? Because I was fighting for ego and accolades and nothing. But by the way, I love MMA, I love sports, I'm a competitive. Nothing's wrong with those things, but when you're doing that and you're pursuing those things, but not pursuing the most important things, when you're pursuing the next promotion or the next raise or the next opportunity, and you're chasing the next accolade, but you're not doing that as a husband and a father, then there's a problem. Yep. And it was very clear to me in that cage and that self-reflection that's where I was at. My wife wasn't there. My wife and kids were devastated, and I just won this another notch on my record and earned this ranking, And I walked out there, my head held low, and I went back to my apartment. And that was the night that I made the decision that, hey, maybe my family will be sad without me, but they're going to be better off. And I made the decision. I believe that lie, that same hopeless thought that finds a home in the hearts of over 20 veterans today.
Yes.
And who knows in our country, because I know we're at a suicide high in our country. The news won't talk about it in a minute, but we're at a suicide epidemic in our country.
Yeah.
And many people believe that same lie, that same hopeless thought that maybe my family, maybe my loved ones, maybe my friends will be sad without me, but they're going to be better off. The world's going to be a better place without me. And to make that very permanent decision to temporary problems and in their life. And but that's where I was at, and I believe that. And it came to that conclusion, that ring. Not because of my circumstances, because of the choices I was making. Right?
And that's the sole reason, Chad, that Jason and I and the team put together this thing nearly 3 years ago. We were trying to get men off the ledge because so many people in my life personally have committed suicide. So many.
Yeah.
So that's the single reason that we do this. Because like you, there's so many men that they can't take it. They don't have God in their lives, and they feel that the temporary thing right now is to leave and to move on, basically. So I'm just so grateful tonight for what you've done and your valuable time. And keep doing what you're doing. We'll keep praying for you. And thank you for your books. And guys, seriously, you need to read Saving Aziz and also Mission Without Borders. Powerful stuff.
And then my fiction book comes out May 13th.
Tell us about that.
Silent Horizons is a fiction series coming out. Three book fiction series. So anybody wants to support stuff I do, you can pre-order Silent Horizons now on anywhere books are sold, Amazon, anywhere books are sold. My podcast, I have a podcast as well.
Absolutely.
The Resilient Show. The Resilient Show. And if any veteran, first responder out there, or spouse of needs help, MightyOaksPrograms.org. We do over $8 million a year in programming for free. We'll even pay for your travel. No strings attached, no questions. We don't care if you have a dishonorable discharge, whatever. If you raise your hand to serve, or you're a spouse of that, go to MightyOaksPrograms.org.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in here at the Legacy Men's Podcast. Chad, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, yeah, man. Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Thanks for what you guys are doing.
Thank you so much, Chad. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it.